Hey! Welcome back to another tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how I made the track Bedtime with KRANE. Now if you haven't checked out KRANE yet or don't know about KRANE, then you must be the craziest hipster ever because this dude is killing it and he's amazing. So check out his music. So let's dive into this track. We're just going to take a look at the different layers, get into the session, see what's going on. I don't even know what's going on. Let's find out. Alright, first layer we've got here is the Rhodes part. Now let's give it a listen just by itself. Take a look at the MIDI here. By the way, I'm going to do another video showing you how to play this exact chord progression, voicings and all, on push and on piano very soon, so just hang tight. So for this Rhodes, I used Electric, the built-in Rhodes emulator in Ableton, which is very, very badass. You can make a lot of cool sounds ranging from very kind of classic 70s Rhodes styles to whirlies to anything in between. I'm going to do another video on just that too. I think that could be good. So to achieve this sound here, the stiffness is real low, the force is pretty high, and you can play around with these to get anywhere from something that's pretty bitey to more of a mellow, kind of softer fluff on the attack. And the big tonal element here that makes it sound the way it is the pickup symmetry being at 50%. Let me just quickly show you what happens when you change between that being all the way at 0 and 100. So when the pickup is at 0, you actually only hear the higher octave harmonic, like one octave above. It becomes much more brighter and present. It's a cool sound. I use that a lot too. And the opposite, very dark and full and fundamental. Also really pretty and nice. So with this sound, you get a little bit of both. You just put it right in the middle. Boom, there it is. I'm really OCD, so I couldn't have it not be at 50%. 49, hell no. And for the EQing, cutting out the super lows, there's a bit of a bubble going on around the low mids. Thought I'd take that out. A little bit of dynamic compression so that it's just not wobbling too much. And some side chaining that you can see is automated is going to happen later. Let's keep it moving. So in this next section here, we've got some synth layering. We've got a guy called Stabby. And this was made with Operator. And once again, we've got some scooping of low mids, and obviously you don't need the low fluffy stuff. You always want to keep your super low end very, very clear for your sub and your bass drum. That's all you want hanging out down there, basically. Anything below like 90 hertz, 100 hertz. So let's take a look at the synth. We've got one oscillator that's just a pure full saw wave. Now you know on Operator, by the way, definitely got you in an Operator video coming soon, promise. All these different waveform options, and these other saw waves have less overtones. Like you can see, if you get a saw 8, it's just going to be the first 8 overtones. Saw 16 is going to be the first 16 overtones, etc. Saw D is just full blast, just like overtones. So it's very, very bright, full sound. Straight up too bright, but then with a filter, you could kind of roll off the frequencies you don't need and get the right tone from there. So it's always a good starting point if you want to get that big, full, take up like wall of sound thing. You just go to the Saw D, good to go. And I've also got a little bit of noise in here. So much quieter than the Saw waveform, but just a little bit to give it some kind of gristle, some grit. Fun fact, almost all acoustic instruments, trumpets, saxophones, guitars, drums, piano, flutes, all of them, human voice, they all have a lot of noise. Like if you listen really closely to a cello or a violin playing, there's a lot of this kind of like grumbly, hissy, just and that stuff is really, really nice. We love noise. You like noise a lot more than you think you do. So anytime you have a chance to put some noise into your synths, do it. Do it. Alright, so let's take a look at what's going on with this synth. So it's got this kind of stabby pulsating thing. And the way you do that, after you've set your oscillators, get your tone going, is with the filter. Now you see I've got this automated filter frequency here. We're just going to ignore that for a sec. This is what it's like without the filter. It's just a big, sustained, kind of overbearing, gross sound. So we have the filter on at this nice low frequency, and we have no filter envelope. A filter envelope would just be a one-time event, like just a single gesture, like a bow, but we want a repeated gesture, which means that there's going to be an LFO involved. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, What is all this stuff? LFO envelope? I got you. I'm going to do videos breaking down all this stuff. Right now I'm just going to jump into an overview of this track. I got you on all of that. What we're going to do is we're going to turn on the LFO here. And these 4 options right here are the routings for the LFO. Now if you had A, B, and C, and D, it would go to these oscillators here and it would affect the pitch. We don't want that right now. We just want it to go to the filter. So you hit filter, boom. And now we have the rate being sunk to the MIDI clock of 16th notes. And the amount isn't too high, otherwise it just gets a little too overdone. I'll show you what that sounds like. That's 100%. That's too much. 60% feels about right. Less would become more of a more delicate little fluff, like So just find your sweet spot. Like with anything, find your sweet spot. And what's happening is based on the cutoff frequency, which you can see is automating gradually up through this section. It's going from a higher cutoff and zooming down to that designated cutoff frequency. Every 16th note, creating this stabby kind of like percussive effect. Sounds really, really good in a lot of settings. Try it out. And to top it off, a little bit of chorus. Actually, a lot of chorus. I love chorus. This is without the chorus. Great sound too. I mean, you can't go wrong with a filtered saw wave. You really cannot. The chorus is just giving it a nice width, scooping out mids, and that is being layered with something called wavy, which seems to also have a filter automation with some resonance and maybe a bit of vibrato. So this is an instance where the LFO is routed to an oscillator's pitch instead of the filter. That's pretty subtle right now. This is what it sounds like when you start to turn that up. It's wiggling. At a pretty slow speed too. Let's see what happens if that's faster. Yeah, okay. So it's like an opera, like soprano singer's vibrato. It's like... And it looks like we have a saw wave and a square wave. Pretty equally balanced. A little more of a saw wave. A square wave is pretty blunt. It could overpower a saw wave very easily. And a little bit of noise. And the big thing for this synth is the flanger. A heavy amount of flanger. And flanger's kind of an unpredictable thing, but you could just kind of mess around with this XY axis until you get the right kind of sizzle that you want. And a bit of chorus, once again scooping out low mids. And this reverb is kind of giving it a roomy effect, but nothing that rings too much and makes it dirty or messy. Just something that kind of just puts it in a space. Now down here, it looks like I froze a piano to save CPU. That's a very smart move. We'll talk about that sometime too. And I just played a quick little octave on a piano. And by the way, I did this with the Ableton stock piano. So in this instance, I took that piano, I played octaves, booty, cut the lows, and this is very, very heavy on the reverb. A heavy mix, 80%, long decay time, but small room size, which means you have a heavy balance of the early reflections. It's very kind of delay, bouncy, and less of this kind of long, more diffused, sustained ring. Let's take a look at the sub. So when I made this track at KRANE's house, this was a sub that he pulled up from his collection. And you can see here it's called AJ Complicated 808s. AJ is Alexander Lewis, by the way, another seriously dope producer. Check him out if you haven't already. So just look through this effect chain right now and you're going to see, god damn, this is insanely complicated. All this, all this, all this, all this, all this, all this, oh my god, and then this, and then more, and then more. Alright, so I'm going to skip over this. I'm going to teach you how to make really, really big, really dope subs, super simply, in another video. In the meantime, let's just take a look at the MIDI. So you can see the MIDI is very sparse on this. It's just the attacks, and the sustain is done through the patch. And it mostly mirrors the bass drum. There's occasional bass drums that are by themselves, but as much as possible, the bass drum is working with the sub. And the placement of these bass drums and the sub, the way they work together, is very kind of eclectic, sporadic, syncopated. It's not like a steady groove, which kind of gives it this very kind of just floaty, dreamy feel. Alright, let's take a look at the percussion. We've got this hi-hat here. Just a very simple hi-hat, some sort of loop. And to get the tone that we had, vocoder. Now a vocoder is a few different ways to use it. That might be worth making a video on too. You could either have an input routing MIDI into it that determines the pitch. So if you connect it with a synth, that's one way to go. Very cool sound. I'm gonna have to show you how to do that. Or you could have pitch tracking, where it tries its best to track the pitch of the input on the channel and then superimpose any of these 4 waveforms, from saw to these strange pulse waves to just pure square. Or, which is actually the coolest for drums and percussive things, is if you just do noise, where it converts the tone of the input into pure noise, and you get these very kind of Robocop-y, that kind of stuff. And it's really, really dope. Cool, futuristic sounds. You can go from there. And there's a lot of tonal things you could do, like with the formant, make it much brighter or much darker. Darker's cool. And over here we have some reverb being automated and some compression. So the big thing there is the vocoder on the hi-hat. Here we just have some little snare ghost notes. Very, very simple, subtle accentuating stuff. And here's just some little cowbells. Ding, ding. Some little clicks. As much of this kind of jungly, kind of Foley type stuff that you could get into a track. Awesome. Like drum sounds look great. Everybody loves a nice snare. Obviously you got to have a good kick, claps. But if you could get into this thing where you've got like little bells and clicks and percussive-y sounds, that goes a long, long, long ways. And down here we've got a pattern written out on a jingle with a lot of velocity variance, so it kind of sounds like it's pretty humanized, and with this kind of counterpart long jingle. So by the way, this is something that KRANE showed me, and this is a very, very cool way to do drums, where you create a couple drum racks, and each one of these drum racks has a specialty. So this drum rack right here is all about jingles and, you know, jangle sounds. It's kind of like upper high frequency stuff. And then you have another drum rack that's just kicks, like this one right here. This is a whole drum rack with like 88 different awesome kicks. And then you've got another drum rack that is just snares. So if you do that, you'll basically never have to browse for drums again. So that being said, let's move along and check out some rest of this percussion. I love using snaps and claps. I think they sound just very human-y and hit you in all the good feels every single time. So as much of this kind of very organic-y stuff you could get in the track, yes. So we just got this cool little syncopated snap clap pattern, and you can see these snaps and claps are a little bit ahead of the beat to just give it a little bit of forward oomph. And here I think we've got our snares. And here we have another cool use of vocoder using the noise setting. And this time, it's on a drum break that is pitched way up. That's what it originally sounded like. Yeah, just like a dope Questlove style drum beat. I think it might actually be Questlove. Let's run it back. First you pitch it up way, way high, so you get less of the low end. Gets very punchy. And now with the noise vocoder setting, so it just gets very robo-talky. And a little bit of EQ to get rid of that mud, because we're just trying to get the kind of shakery, hatty part of it. And then the kick down here. So by itself, the kick part is very sporadic and kind of eclectic and all over the place. Now I really love doing kick rolls. I think kicks are obviously the most important part of a track, but can be used to create very dynamic gestures. So I love doing this kind of stuff, and that's just done with MIDI, and you can very easily do it with the pencil. Adjust all these different values if you want, and just get the right type of curve so that it builds very dramatically. Rah! All right, and let's go ahead and hear all the drums and percussion together real quick. Yeah, there's a lot going on. It's a cool little groove. Now in this middle section, this kind of breakdown, it kind of switches to a more stripped down, kind of lo-fi hip-hop thing. Now the big new element here is these little slice-ups of some very like DJ Premier style DJ scratching. Just little blips here and there that kind of make it feel like some DJ's going. Now there's also this very sparse melody that's done on 3 different operators. One is just a very simple sine wave, and later it is joined by a saw with kind of a soft attack here and very low cutoff. So all 3 of them are very dark. The third one being the square wave. And the saw and square are panned pretty hard left and right to just kind of create this little like choir of 3 operator synths, sine, saw, and square, the trilogy. And they're all being grouped into a group of just some ping pong delay and pretty heavy reverb just to give it ambience space. Now right before the drop, a reverse cymbal, always effective to transition to the next sections and create that kind of rush climax. And here I made something I like to call a bendy. Looks like I called it saw bendy because it's saw waves. Now for the oscillators, I've got 3 saw waves, pretty heavily detuned from one another, and noise to just create a nice wonky sound. And there's a filter envelope with a good amount of slope so that it accelerates. The rate of change gets faster and faster. And what I did is I had the attack, so the part where the filter goes from inaudibly low all the way up to pretty damn high, be the exact amount of time of this little clip length. So by the end of that, it gets bright. And the same thing for the pitch envelope. I made it around the same time. Looks like I did it on the decay this time. So it looks like the sweet spot's around 3.8 seconds, which makes it bend from very low up 3 whole octaves because I have negative 36 steps right there. And there's slope, which means that it accelerates. And let me show you what it looks like without the slope. So without the slope, it just goes up very steadily and linearly, and is much less exciting than when you have a good amount of slope, so that it starts off increasing very gradually and then really picks up and accelerates at the end. Kind of like a roller coaster effect. You're going up, it's about to go down, and then it starts to go fast. Very exciting that way. And as for the MIDI, looks like it's just a power chord, a C, G, and a C. And there's chorus, cutting up the super lows. Looks like there's a little bit of saturation. That's what the soft clip light is indicating here. More on that in another video too. And a heavy reverb mix so that it sounds very echoey and kind of ringy, metallic even. So very high, dry, wet. Small decay time, small room size. That's how you get that. Now moving on to the climax section of this piece, we've got kind of everything just on full blast, including all of these synth layers, the Rhodes, the synths I showed earlier, with all their filters completely open, including a new, very bright, intense scream type synth, which is made out of 4 different saw waves, very detuned from one another, 15 cents each, I believe. A little bit of noise. There's a filter envelope, so it has a bit of a wah. The cutoff is at 200 hertz, which is pretty low. But this gives it a very vowel-like quality. And the LFO is creating the opera-like tremolo. That's what that sounds like, more extreme. 12% kind of seems to be the sweet spot, because 12% I think will create 1 half step of vibrato. Heavy chorus. Scooping of low mids, very effective. There seems to be some saturation, which will create a thicker sound. It's basically a very subtle type of overdrive or fuzz. You're going to get a lot of boost in the mids and the low end if you do that. And same thing with reverb effect, where you have a pretty high wet mix, small room, and very small room size. So it's very early reflection-y and bouncy, kind of like if somebody was playing the synth out of an amp in like a really small little like room in the basement of some cool club, like very punk. So all that is creating the big thick wall of sound, and everything else is just kind of on full blast. The bass drum is doing all this cool stuff down here, all this cool stuff here, and they're kind of doing this unison thing. You know, it's very like sporadic, kind of eclectic, virtuosic. The sub is doing these big dives, and everything is just kind of very syncopated and woo, like this. Now the big synth lead that's kind of doing all the shred work, which I played on push and later touched up in MIDI, is 2 saw waves, slightly detuned from one another. And there's a very subtle frequency envelope. Looks like I just used 30% here, starting at 2 kilohertz. So it stays pretty bright, but has a little bit of a wah, a tiny bit. Just a little bit. Now there's chorus to give it a little bit of spread. Scooping of the low mid, there's delay, reverb to create ambience, all of this to kind of just fill up its space. And lastly, to create that vibrato that grew gradually on that long note, as well as the bend, if you go to this bottom right tab on operator here, you have all these routing options. Now, two things happening. One, the pitch I set to 2 half steps, a whole step. By default, it's going to make it 5 half steps, which is a little impractical. Try having it just be 2 half steps, because then on a MIDI controller on the pitch bar or on push, you can do this. And secondly, where it says aftertouch here, I had it connect to the LFO amount, that's what A means, and I set the value to 100 so you have full range. So what that allows you to do is any MIDI controller or push, which does have aftertouch. Now aftertouch, by the way, is how hard you push once your finger is already down on the key. This is me playing the note, and that's me adding aftertouch. Oh, you gotta push hard, you gotta be strong. So with the amount of pressure I apply with my finger, I can change the amount of aftertouch, which is affecting the vibrato. So it's another way to make your synth very expressive and humanized. And for the outro of this track, we bring back a lot of the textures from the breakdown, this more kind of broken down hip hop thing. And this is another very, very classic producer move, just to get a nice vinyl crackle. You could find nice vinyl crackles on Splice, once again your homie's hard drive, or just freaking record your record player or tape player, any of the stuff to create hissy noises. Fun fact, you could also get a very similar, cool, soothing result if you record like waves from a beach, running water, wind. Any of this stuff can be processed to give that same effect of subtle background texture. But in this case, we just used actual record player noise. Now the last layer you hear is some vocals that I salvaged from the 2 other tracks from my most recent EP, Headroom and Driving. So I dragged their vocals out, and I found them by just accessing the project files in one of these folders that I made over here, where you could pull channels and tracks from any of your other tracks. Highly recommend doing this. And I put them in here, and their effects are pretty similar to how they were in the other tracks, but I added a 100% reverb mix, kind of a medium size, very large, spacious. You just get this very kind of echoey, distant sound. And the driving vocals, I just pitched down the octave in the clip right here, -12. Get the formant just right.
I'll drive the straight into forever.
Lower formants will sound like a bigger, bassier, fatter man.
I'll drive the straight into forever.
As you bring the formant up,
I'll drive the straight into forever.
it gets more skinny and nasally like me. And here I just grabbed the end line here, just ever, and just kind of washed that with delay and reverb, classic stuff there. But hits the spot every time. Now we also brought back the Rhodes part, but up the octave in just kind of a very chill, cool, taily off kind of way. By the way, and this is going to blow your mind, but you could download this exact project file in the link below and check out everything that's going on in here. All the instruments, all the samples, all the drum sounds. Mind blown! Thanks so much for watching my in-depth breakdown of my track Bedtime with KRANE. Check out this dude KRANE if you haven't already. He is amazing. I've got many more videos coming that will break down in more in-depth the techniques that I showed you in this video. So much love to you. Have fun and stay Swiss. Mwah.